Good morning, everybody. We hope that everyone had a really good weekend, and we welcome you to this morning's webinar. A little bit of background for some of the new faces that may or may not have been to training with Eden in the past. Eden was actually the very first vanEE distributor in North America. We were founded in 1981. Our company is a specialty distributor. We're focused on IEQ, heat pumps, and hydronics. So today, as you have any questions, feel free to ask the questions and we will address them at the end using the question box. Everybody will remain muted just because of the number of people that we have attending. A copy of this presentation will be distributed afterwards, and this video will also be posted on our YouTube channel later in the week. So first off, I'd like Grant just to take a moment to introduce himself. Grant is the president of Eden Energy. Grant, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Mike, and we'll introduce Mike. Mike Riedler is the moderator for this session, and I'm the president at Eden Energy, and I've got about 40 some odd years of experience doing ventilation. I've got probably over 100 HRV installations when I was a contractor, and now we've sold thousands of vanEE HRVs and ERVs as a specialized distributor. We have a unique experience with vanEE, as Mike indicated, being their first outlet for product anywhere. I wasn't involved in their original R200 units, but certainly their 1000 and 2000s. And when vanEE closed their plant in Saskatoon to move it to Drummondville, I ended up with the engineering manuals, and so you'll be able to get service parts for those old 1000 and 2000 units from Eden Energy that the manufacturer no longer provides, because I was able to copy the information from the manuals. So we have a long history with vanEE. I have a long history with vanEE as well. And our other co-presenter is Ryan Carr. Ryan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure, perfect. Thanks, Grant. Yeah, Ryan Carr here with the Air Solutions team. Air Solutions, we've had a long-standing relationship with Eden Energy as well, as Grant mentioned, Grant and Mike for that matter. You know, they were the first distributor in Canada. We have had a long-standing relationship as Air Solutions with vanEE. We've been their representative for over 3 decades now. Myself, I've been in the industry coming up on a dozen years. Majority of those with Air Solutions, coming up on about 8-9 years with them. I currently serve as the Ontario technical lead for Air Solutions. So, you know, I do conduct a number of trainings, site visits, things of that nature, and assist the rest of our team with knowledge on the products that we represent. Of course, vanEE has had a history of innovation, and we'll obviously talk about that with these new units here, and just happy to be a part of it. So thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, that said, we have a lot of material to cover, and we're going to do it in about an hour. So if we haven't covered anything in enough detail for you, we'll have, as Mike said, a question and answer session at the end. But the whole presentation will be available to everybody that's part of this presentation once we've completed it. So that said, as Ryan said, vanEE has been very good at listening to what customers want. But where they've exceeded the competition is they've been very good at going out and collecting the information, whether that be through their agents such as Air Solution, or whether that be through focus groups with consultants, contractors, and end users. And I believe that this AI series really has taken hold because they listened to and incorporated a lot of the things that everyone was asking for. And today's presentation, as you can see by the agenda here, is loaded with features, installation tips, electrical connection information, balancing, controls, maintenance, and troubleshooting. So we will quickly go through everything, but as I said before, you have the opportunity to ask questions at the end. So the first thing I'll talk about is that you have both top and side connected units. As you can see here, you have both ERV and HRV in the same box. You have up to 160 CFM in the same box. You have up to 75% SRE in the same box. All the units are HVI certified, and all the units that are released to date are Energy Star. Now, not all of the units we're going to be talking about are released. They will be released shortly, but some of the ERVs we're still waiting for release. The next thing that is a big change is the vanEE model numbers now actually tell you everything you need to know about the unit that you're selecting. The V is for vanEE, obviously. The 160, so if you chose a V160, it's a 160 CFM unit. As you can see, they have 150 CFM, 130 CFM, and 110 CFM units. Now the 160, 30, 50, and 10 are at 0.2 external static pressure. As you know, that's going to be very hard to do in actual field installations. You're more like 0.4. So what I would tell everybody, when you look at this, take 10 CFM off. So a V160 really, when it's installed, would do 150 CFM. The next letter, ERV or HRV, easy, HRV core, ERV core. The next letter, 75 or numbers 75, you have a 75% SRE unit series and you have a 65% SRE unit series. The R at the end is what type of defrost the unit has, recirculation defrost, or N for exhaust defrost. And the T is for top or side ports. So the model number tells you exactly the features of the unit. Now here's a list of all the models. So you can see starting from the left, you have a V110, then a V130 HRV and ERV, and these are 65% efficient SRE efficiency, a V160 at 65, ERV and HRV, a V150 75%, and a V160 75%. So you can see that I've circled the V150. Why have I done that? Because that is going to be, in my opinion, the unit that you're going to select for almost everything. Because these units all have ECM fan motors, a V150 will perform just like a V110. You just run the CFM down. Why would I choose the 150/75? Well, it is priced better than any of these other models. So why would I pay more money for a V110/65, a V130/65, or a V160/65 when I can get a 75% efficient unit for more money, for less money? Now, if you need that extra 10 CFM, you would then choose the V160H or E75. But the vast majority of your units are going to be the V150. Now this chart shows all sorts of features, but we'll get into them as the presentation goes. But down at the bottom, you can see the models. So the intent really is that the AI series is going to replace all the 40Hs or 40Es eventually, the 60Hs, the 65Hs, the 90Hs, the 100H, ERVs, HRVs with and without ECM fan motors. So this model will replace all the others, making everybody's life a lot simpler. Now, the features that are going to be most beneficial to every installation. One, as I said before, you have top port units. You'll also see that the units are very small in dimension, less than 2 feet square. They're 37 pounds, 6-foot cord. The one difference in the whole series from 110 to 160 is that the 160 unit has 6-inch duct connections and all the others have 5-inch duct connections. There's the side ported unit. The other thing to note at both the top and the side is the round ducts. It's easier to connect round duct to round collars than to squish round duct into an oval shape to connect it to oval connectors. And a lot of units with competitors and with vanEE, where they've got top connections in the past, they've had oval connections, and this just makes it easier. The other main feature that you're going to see is the AI series all comes with a version of an ECM fan motor called Permanent Magnet Synchronous Motor, PMSM. So this is a motor that is popular in electric cars. It is 37% more efficient than regular ECM fan motors and 60% more efficient than PSC fan motors. The other main feature for an HRV with this motor is that it has less vibration. So that is a big thing, especially if you want to do mounting on the wall. The tradition with vanEE is to have static cores for both HRV and ERV, so they've never had rotating wheels with the issue of you have to have a drive and a belt to rotate a wheel. So with the AI series, you have 65% HRVs and ERVs and 75% HRVs and ERVs. But again, from a pricing point of view, I don't know why you choose models with 65%. The other big change is in filtration. So in the past, vanEE has had filters that are only there to protect the core from getting plugged. Now the standard filter is a MERV 8, which is giving air quality improvement on filtration of that air, not just protecting the core from getting plugged. And the optional 13 MERV filter is now reaching that level that furnaces and air handlers have, where the MERV 13 filter has become the industry standard for the upgraded filter. Now you can get it in a HRV and ERV. The unique thing about the AI series is also that they have what they're calling virtual air technology. This is an automatic and continuous self-balancing of the supply and the exhaust motors. So with this, you always have a balanced system. It doesn't matter if you have the filters getting dirty on, let's say, the fresh air side and not the exhaust side. The unit automatically measures the airflow and adjusts the fan speed to keep in balance. If in the future you add a run in the basement, you've added a bathroom in the basement, so rather than having to go back and rebalance everything, the unit sees this added resistance, it adjusts accordingly. So this is a really unique feature that everyone will appreciate. The other main difference is now on the outside of the unit, the control box has an LED screen. This LED screen is going to be useful for the homeowner and the contractor. It shows the CFMs, it shows the system status, high, low, intermittent, off. It is used for startup so that you can set up the parameters during startup. It also is the screen to tell you what troubleshooting information is needed if there are any issues. And it also has an event recorder so that you can go back and see what has happened with this unit over time. So these are really great features that the contractor and the homeowner will make use of. The other feature that especially consultants have asked for is when the unit is turned off, that the exhaust and the supply air duct system is shut down so that you're not bringing in outdoor air through either the exhaust side or the supply side. This isn't a problem, obviously, when the unit is running because it's exhausting air through one duct system and exhausting through the other. So you have, as shown here, you have a fresh air damper motorized and you have an exhaust air damper motorized. And finally, and I shouldn't say finally, but one of the things that are overlooked a lot is the concentric hood kit. So the concentric hood kit use is limited by what is, in Ontario, by what is said in the installation manual. So if your manual didn't say you could use a concentric hood kit, you couldn't use it. And really the criteria was if your unit did more than 110 CFM, it was deemed that the pressure drop through the concentric hood kit would be too high and you couldn't use it. And the units less than 110 CFM could. So now the whole AI series has one installation manual. And basically it says what's here. For units set at 110 or less CFM, you can use it. So for a unit such as one that the V150 that can go up to about 140 CFM when installed, if you set the high speed, because you, and we will get into this as we go along, as you do the startup, you set what CFM speed. So if you set high speed at 110 and low speed at whatever, 80, 85, you can now use the concentric hood kit. Now I'm going to get into some of the installation features. They're not going to be new, but they are going to be interesting. That the system comes with 4 brackets so that you can mount it on the wall now. Due to the type of ECM fan motor, it's a vibration reduced unit, so you can have a single mount on one stud as shown here on the left hand side, or you can have a dual mount on 2 studs 16 inches apart. The brackets are included. You can also see from an installation point of view that they're saying your unit should be installed in an area between 50 degrees Fahrenheit and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So that does limit putting it in garages at some time or in attics at some time, but it is a very wide range. Also, with HRVs, you do have a drain. You should install it close to the drain. In ERVs, no drains are required. Included with all the units are the chains. The interesting thing here for when you're doing a ceiling hanging is the chains do no longer have springs. It is not necessary to isolate with springs, again, because of the low vibration caused by the new ECM fan motors. The intelligence of this system in the AI product offering is significant in that you need to tell it how your installation looks. Again, because it's going to be balancing airflows for every type of installation. So in the setup process, you're going to select fully ducted, exhaust ducted, or simplified installations. This is pretty evident that T1's the fully ducted. Usually that's a radiant heated or cooled system where you don't have any forced air system at all in the house, and you have exhaust and supply duct runs from the HRV and ERV. You have the T2 exhaust ducted in supply into the cold air return. This is the normal practice where you're using HRVs to exhaust out of bathrooms and out of kitchens. This type of installation does not require the furnace to be interlocked with the HRV operation. It is suggested because you'd rather have the fresh air go into every room in the house through the warm air duct system rather than the exhaust ducts, which may be one on a floor, or maybe one in a bedroom plus floor. But it's not required. You don't have to do the interlock. The T3 is, again, the exhaust ducted, but now the fresh air goes into the supply of the furnace or air handling system. Here, you should interlock the furnace and the HRV operation so that the air from the HRV when the furnace or air handler is off does not work backwards through the air handler and furnace, bringing hot, moist air, let's say in the summertime, and causing condensation or mold growth issues. Also, with this kind of installation, it's not recommended for high velocity systems. So that's why we typically tell people do the T2, the exhaust ducted into the cold air return. T4 is the simplified installation. This is used an awful lot now, exclusively on retrofit, but in new home installations where you are going to have bath fans and range hoods, and you're just meeting the principal ventilation requirement with your HRV. With this type of installation, you have to have the interlock of the HRV and the furnace fan. Otherwise, you're going to short circuit air and you're going to do nothing for bringing fresh air into the home. And T5 is a simplified, but again, rather than going into the cold air return, you're going into the fresh air supply. Again, you're going to have to interlock the furnace and the HRV operation, and you're not recommended for high velocity systems. So this kind of information is taken by the AI series to allow it to perform at its peak. Now, as I've said before, you're going to get the drain connection materials, hose, drain fittings included in the HRV, but not in the ERV because you don't need a drain in the ERV. Moisture during defrost in the ERVs gets re-evaporated so that a drain isn't required. Now, this is just a chart, and Ryan's going to go through it in more detail. When you do the initial startup, you get to choose whether you have in defrost, extended defrost, or standard defrost. As I described, you tell it what kind of duct installation you're connected to, T1 through T5. There's a dry contact relay. You get to choose when that relay is energized, whether you have minimum fan, intermittent fan, auto fan, and maximum fan operation. Override is when you have your push button switches in your bathrooms. What's going to happen? Balanced ventilation is what happens right now. You put the system into high speed, your supply fan goes to high, your exhaust fan goes to high, and you ventilate, and there's a balanced pressure system within the house. The performance setting, the house will be slightly imbalanced because let's say you set a 150, a V150 unit, the maximum CFM at 110 because you wanted to use a concentric hood kit. So with the performance setting, when you engage a bathroom switch, the supply fan goes to maximum speed, but the exhaust, which is 130, because that's what you've set the supply and exhaust max CFM, but the exhaust fan goes to the maximum CFM the unit is able to do, not the 130, but in this case, let's say 140. So the house is slightly out of balance because your supply fan is at 130 and the exhaust fan is at 140. In the discretion setting, your house can be slightly more out of balance because it doesn't change the supply fan setting from what it is running at. So if it was running at minimum speed, then it stays at minimum, but the exhaust fan goes to high speed. So you could have a higher imbalance of pressure, but if your supply fan was set at high speed, then there wouldn't be any difference. It would be just like a balanced system when you push the bathroom override switch. And the intermittent is if you have a unit that has recirculation on the 20 minutes on followed by 40 minutes off, you can put it into recirculation mode rather than the off mode so that the HRV still runs, but it's just moving air around the house and not bringing any fresh air in. You can see by the asterisks, the standard setup is the factory setting, so you may not have to change anything. I should note that the V150H and E75s, they are exhaust ducted unit or exhaust defrost units, whereas all the other units are recirculation defrost. So for the installations where it's required for recirculation defrost, which is no negative pressure in the space, you would want to stay with the recirculation units. But my experience has shown now very few installations is this a matter because everything is now direct vented. Where from a combustion air point of view, the system, the design of the whole system is taking into account that you do have to have makeup air, and the HRV has never been used for makeup air. The other feature that people will like is there's a whole new series of controls that Ryan's going to go through, but the top of the line control, the touchscreen control, it has a lot of features. It's used in the startup. It's used to show, as you can see in the left-hand side, you can show what the maximum setting is, what the medium speed setting is, what the minimum setting is, whether you have recirculation or not, what you've set your override to do. So again, the controls that are now offered with the AI series is going to be a very big feature. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ryan as he talks about how you're going to connect electrically all of these things.
Perfect. Thanks, Grant. So yeah, one thing to note, as we'll see as we work our way through, wherever possible, well, moving forward, we're going to want to rough in with 4-wire. All of the new controls, including both our main wall controls as well as the push buttons or the auxiliary controls, are now all 4-wire. So as you're working through applications, in new construction, it's certainly important that we rough in. There are some workarounds for older homes that may only have 3-wire, for example, on the push buttons. Mike and Grant are well aware of this and have some wiring diagrams for you guys. So, certainly follow up with them if you do encounter those types of applications. But we have 2 terminal strips on the unit, one for our main wall control, one for our auxiliary control. So the auxiliary control wiring harness is going to be slightly smaller at, I believe it's 6 pins, whereas our main wall control terminal strip is going to be 8 pins. But you can very easily see that once you get your hands on the unit. Thanks, Grant. This next slide, Grant. So one new set of connections on this unit is, as Grant mentioned on the previous menu, is the dry contact. So we now have, sorry, there we go. Yep. We now have the ability to provide a little bit more robust functionality when a dry contact is closed. We're of course seeing a trend toward cleaning up the wall acne, if you will, and integrating a number of different things into a smart thermostat. So previously, we were somewhat limited, whereby we would effectively push the unit into low speed continuous off of the onboard control, and often close that dry contact on OL and OC on the previous generation units. That, of course, was our high-speed override circuit. So in effect, the smart thermostat was acting like a dehumidistat, if you will. Either that, or we could close on B and G and push it into low speed, but it was quite limited. Now, on the terminal strip, you'll see that we have a vent connection, vent, common, and R for power. So if your thermostat needs 24 volt, it can draw it from the unit. If it doesn't, then all we would wire up to is vent and common on the accessory terminals. And when we close on that, I'll have to change this slide in the future, my apologies, but we would be looking at the dry contact menu. So we see just above the highlighted box that we can actually dictate what happens when that contact closes. We can say, okay, I want the unit to go into minimum or low speed continuous, intermittent mode, auto. So auto utilizes the intake air thermistor and will ventilate based on outdoor temperature to keep the house within the sort of prescribed, ASHRAE prescribed humidity zone, and then max being high-speed ventilation. So a lot more robust functionality out of third-party integration with controls now. Next slide, please. So for furnace interconnect, when we have a simplified installation, code typically prescribes that we interlock with the furnace. Again, that allows the furnace fan to help with the distribution of air throughout the home. So it is a 4-wire connection now, and we'll go through the optional wiring here in a second. But for a basic air handler or furnace interconnect, what we're going to do from the thermostat, we're going to go Y to Y on our furnace, W to W on the furnace. G will come down to G on the terminal strip of the vanEE unit. We're going to break the G wire because some of you, if you've been working with vanEE for some time and you are familiar with working with some more affordable thermostats that are, typically par for the course in new construction, that the capacitors in those thermostats were such that they wouldn't prevent backfeed sometimes, and we were seeing outdoor condensers come on inadvertently. So when we break that G wire, it seems to prevent that. So again, from the thermostat, we go from G down to G on our terminal strip, and then we have a GF, G furnace, that would go over to G on the furnace. Common to common from our unit over to the air handler. And then we split the R connection, so R from the thermostat to both the air handler or furnace as well as the vanEE unit. And that's going to be a standard interconnect. So what happens here is the HRV or ERV is the main or the master. So whenever it comes on, it calls on the fan on the air handler or the furnace. If we want to synchronize, so what that allows us to do, as you see on the final point on the slide there, if the unit is operating in intermittent mode, it will wait for its 20 minutes of ventilation until the air handler or furnace is already in operation. So in order to synchronize, we see that we take 2 more wires. So we split the W connection from the thermostat and go to both the furnace or air handler as well as our unit, as well as that Y wire, and that allows us to synchronize. So, that onboard virtual air technology as Grant had already spoken about a little bit, truly is quite smart and allows us to accomplish a lot of new things with this unit. Next slide, Grant. So our premium control is the advanced touchscreen that we see on screen here. So anybody that's familiar with working with a smartphone nowadays, which is almost everybody, this will be a very familiar feel or tactile feel. You'll notice that the connections on the back of all our controls, sorry, something I should have touched on the previous slide, but the connections on the back of our controls are identical to those on the terminal strip. So it's just really making sure that you're matching up your strands. They're very easily labeled. The beauty of the advanced touchscreen, though, is that we now have a wireless option for our auxiliary controls. So the Deluxe 204060, which is something we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to controls, is a wireless option, 2 AA batteries in that control. And it communicates via Bluetooth to the advanced touchscreen. Right now, they're saying it's about an 80-foot communication range, so pretty good connection range. Up to 5 auxiliary controls can be paired to this control. And then like we would have traditionally seen with our push buttons, you just sort of tap where the logo is down here, and we'll see the LED jump in the corresponding window up top, 20, 40, 60. You'll also see cutouts there for a humidistat or a hygrometer in that control. So within the advanced touchscreen, you can actually set it up whereby, say you're going into your ensuite and you forgot to push the unit into high speed, you can actually program that if that humidistat senses a rapid rise in humidity, it will actually push the unit into high speed automatically. So again, some really nice functionality out of this new platform. Next slide, please. So balancing is quite an easy affair now in these new units. Oh, I see are we freezing up here, Grant? Sorry, just some transition problems with the slides, guys. Bear with us for a second. Okay, well, we'll roll with this. So Grant has already mentioned that there is the onboard LCD display. This really is the backbone of your interaction with the unit initially. So you'll see here a lot of information. Okay. Yeah, we'll see here a lot of information displayed. Even for an inspector, if you are going to undergo an inspection, gives them all the information they need. So really, traditionally we would have been either labeling a balancing label or sharpening on the door. Now we have our airflows clearly displayed. So we see our supply airflow with the arrow coming into the home, our exhaust airflow with the arrow leaving the home. Of course, those are stated in CFM as shown there. And then we have 3 buttons down below. We have our OK button, and then we have our up and down buttons to navigate the menus. And we'll see how we use these as we sort of navigate the initial run process here in the following slides. So next slide. So really quite a simplistic initial run process anymore. So they're really touting this unit as the quickest install in its class, and that's because, well, frankly, we no longer have to balance the unit. The PMSM motors, coupled with the virtual air technology, they take care of the work for you. So there's no more monkeying with balancing dampers. using a MagnaHelic or dual port manometer to read the pressure across the core. The unit diagnoses the installation itself. So once you've hung the unit, ducted it, connected it to electrical, we would see these hourglasses on screen there sort of tumbling and turning, and it's diagnosing the installation. So what it's doing there is it's ramping up and ramping down the supply side motors, ramping up, ramping down the exhaust side motors, and reading the installation which it's connected to, reading the static pressure on the ductwork. Next slide. And what's going to happen, oh, we're going back. There. What's going to happen once it's finished with diagnosing the install is it's going to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Installer, this is the maximum CFM I can give you based upon the static that I'm reading. Are you okay with that? So you can either hit OK, the left button there, or based on your ventilation design, if you need less than that, as Grant had said earlier, we can dial the unit down using the lower button there. And then we select OK. We've now set our maximum CFM. It will then ask us what we would like for low speed. So the factory default, the low speed is going to be 50% of the high speed, which was just set, with the option again to dial it all the way down to 35 CFM. So very, very flexible in the airflows that we select with this unit, and we can truly cater it to the installs that we're seeing. So it's really, you know, one unit to rule them all, and a simplification of the catalog. As you saw earlier, it's replacing quite a number of units. Then it's going to ask us what type of installation it's connected to. So Grant already kind of walked through this. The factory default is a simplified installation, or T4. So if that's okay, again, you would just tap on the OK button and move forward to the next step. If you were, for example, perhaps putting this into a hydronically heated home and you've done a fully ducted installation, we would simply just tap the up button, get to T1, and select that with the OK button, and it would take us on to the next step. Next slide, great. Then it's going to ask us, okay, do we want to enter into the configuration menu? If we don't, we simply just tap OK. It's going to navigate us past it. In order to enter the configuration option menu, we would press and hold the OK button for about 4 seconds. That's either in the initial run process, or if we need to visit this menu afterwards, once the unit's up and running, same idea, we would just stand in front of the unit, press and hold the OK button for about 4 seconds. And we would see the first variable come up on screen, being defrost. So discretion defrost is the factory default. That's for most of Ontario will do the trick. It's as we get into the northern parts of Ontario, where our design day temperatures are quite a bit colder, where we may want to go into the plus defrost and extend the defrost interval. But you know, you should know, I guess, if you're, I would say, under about a -15 design day temperature, you may want to explore using the plus defrost in that instance. Installation we've already spoken about, so you can select that as well. This menu is also where we set up what we want to occur when that ventilation contact or dry contact closes. Override when our 20, 40, 60 push buttons are pushed. You know, Grant spoke about that. Do we want it to be balanced, whereby the system ramps up to high speed on both ends and remains balanced in real time? Performance, which is skewed towards maximum ventilation on the exhaust side, with a slight imbalance potentially, or discretion, whereby your low speed your pressure supply remains where it was set in your current ventilation strategy, and your exhaust ramps up to high speed. and then of course our intermittent. So if we have a recirc-based unit with recirc defrost, we can dictate that in the 40-minute portion of the intermittent mode, as opposed to going into standby, we can have the unit recirculating just to keep the air moving throughout the house. And then that's it. Once you've gone through the initial run process, the unit is now balanced. So again, no need to play with balancing dampers, no need to break out that magnehelic or manometer. The unit balances itself on that initial run process. So you see, that can easily save, 10, 15, 20 minutes per install. So for those of you, especially in the RNC industry, we know that builders are squeezing you guys nowadays, and only giving you so much per rough end. This may give you the ability to install a few more units every day, right? And put some more butter on your toast. So that's a good thing. Once we're on this screen, we can, like we used to be able to do with the onboard push button with the previous generation units, select the mode that the unit is in. So in order to get there, what we would do is we would use the up and down buttons until we see mode in the bottom left corner of the screen. We would hit OK. And then once we're in there, again, we can use the up and down buttons to change between standby, low speed, high speed, and hit OK to make your selection. So as you scroll through, STD, MIN, or MAX will show up on the screen. You would hit OK on the corresponding value you want. Just note, of course, like with the previous generations, if we want the unit to reference the main wall control installed, we do need to ensure that the unit is in standby. So this really is sort of the flow of operations, I guess, on initial startup. So as we start up the unit, again, it asks you to select the maximum CFM. So you would set that, hit OK. It then asks you to select your minimum CFM, hit OK. Then what type of installation are we seeing? As mentioned, T4 is our factory default. We only change that if we need to. And then it's going to bring us back up and say, okay, do we want to get into the operation menu? If you're perfectly fine with what's already set from the factory, just tap OK. It will move you on to that final mode menu where you select the mode that the unit's in. Otherwise, if you want to enter it, you would just hold the OK button for 4 seconds. And again, we can step through all those variables that we just spoke about, then move on to that mode and set that. And then that, again, that's your initial run process. The unit is now balanced, installation is complete, and you can be on to the next one. So to accompany the whole new series of units, we also have a brand new refreshed lineup of controls. So our advanced touchscreen, as we mentioned, is our premier control for the main wall control. That would really be replacing both the Deco Touch and the Platinum. Our automatic control is sort of our most basic. That would be something like the Bronze or the Light Touch, and the dehumidistat does give us kind of bridges that gap between, I guess, Light Touch and Deco Touch, with the ability to have a dehumidistat function. And then we have our auxiliary controls as well. So the wired 2040-60, and then our deluxe 2040-60 that, as mentioned, communicates via Bluetooth to our advanced touchscreen. And we'll step through each of these really quickly in a little more detail. So the advanced touchscreen, very feature rich. So like we used to see on the Deco Touch and the Platinum, it will give us an animation as to what's going on, the operation mode. So if we're ventilating, you'll see arrows entering and exiting the home. If we're recirculating, it will just be a circle within the home. If we have a maintenance alert, something like a filter change requirement or filter clean requirement or an error code, we'll have an alert come up on screen. The control would now give us feedback on errors as well. So we can test the individual components associated with that error, as well as get troubleshooting guidance right on screen. If we're in a high-speed override, we see a timer countdown there. So here we're likely in what's called turbo mode. Turbo mode made its debut on the Gold Touch wall control. So that's 4 hours of high-speed ventilation. Humidity, we would have our set point here. So we see set to 45. Current humidity in this instance is 55%. So it's over limit. So we're going to be in an override to bring that humidity back down. To change our modes, we would tap on that gray mode button. Parameters gets us into that menu that Grant was talking about, where we can verify our airflows and set our airflows, use it as an installation tool. Humidity selector, we just see the arrow there, so that allows us to set our target set point. Speed selector, we can toggle between low, medium, and high. And then information, we can see sort of history of error codes, operation of the unit, like airflows and things like that. So we see here that it can also be used as a diagnostics tool. So again, we can do an airflow test, verify the airflow test, and ensure that the unit is imbalanced, or is balanced, I should say. There's that error code test. So if the error were to involve the dampers or the supply motor, we can individually test each of those components, make sure they're okay, and see what may be the issue. View a log of the most recent error codes and get information on troubleshooting that error code. So quite a helpful tool for us. Then we see our automatic control. So again, this is, fits inside a decor style switch bin, just like the advanced. Comes with the trim plate. And we have a number of modes, and we would simply change the majority of the modes by tapping where the vanEE logo is. So, we tap once, the recirculation arrows would illuminate. Tap once again, it would go into intermittent mode, min, medium, maximum as we tap. Turbo mode, as we said, made its debut on the Gold Touch. So that's 4 hours of high-speed ventilation override before reverting back to whatever strategy was set on the lower portion here. And then auto mode, again, references the intake air thermistor and allows us to ventilate based on outdoor temperature. I should say, sorry, I should have touched on the advanced touchscreen gives us low speed, medium speed, high speed, dehumidistat override, intermittent mode, and the auto and turbo as well. So it's full featured as everything. On this control, sorry, as well, you'll see a little indicator light in the top left because we don't have, same with the dehumidistat here, because we don't have a full screen to show us error feedback. This would just tell us that, there has an error has occurred, or we need to service the filters at that time. So the dehumidistat control, again, we see the cutouts for the integrated humidistat or hygrometer. And again, we would set our target humidity level by tapping where the vanEE logo is. The LED would jump correspondingly to whatever segment. We also have the ability to push the unit into continuous, so low or high continuous, and intermittent mode here as well. So 20 on, 40 off, or 20 on, 40 in recirc if we have a recirc capable unit with that maintenance light up there again in the top left corner. Again, all these controls are 4-wire as well. And then we get to our auxiliary controls. So the 20, 40, 60, again, tapping where that vanEE logo is, we would see the LED jump correspondingly based on the number of taps. So 20 minutes of high speed, 40, 60, etc. Again, do note our old 20, 40, 60s were 3-wire, the new ones are 4-wire. And then our deluxe 20, 40, 60. So again, must be used with the advanced touchscreen in order to integrate with the system, because this would communicate its mode back to the advanced touchscreen via Bluetooth, and then the advanced touchscreen relays that signal via the wired connection to the unit. So again, simply by tapping where the vanEE logo is, 20, 40, 60 minutes, we have a battery indicator, and serves as a battery indicator and a maintenance alert on this control, and a humidity sensor built in. So once again, we can set up the settings in the advanced touchscreen, whereby if we forget to tap that on our way into the shower and the control senses that rapid rise in humidity, we can have it push into a high-speed override regardless. And sorry, here's the menus here in the advanced touchscreen. So, like you would pair, say, a Bluetooth headset with your phone, same idea. When you go into pairing mode, all of the override push buttons would show up on screen. You would just tap on them respectively, and they would pair. And then you can get into the preferences. So the automatic override is what we just spoke about. So we can turn that on with a medium or high sensitivity. And when that automatic override comes on, we can say, okay, we want 20, 40, or 60 minutes of high-speed ventilation. So very simple pairing.
Okay, Ryan, thank you very much. I know that's a lot of information in a very short period of time, but we are available at the end for future questions on the controls and setup and the like. Now I'm just going to take us into the last two sections, maintenance. So the installation manual comes with a complete bill of material and exploded views. You can see very clearly what the components are, what the part numbers are, what units they're used in. So that makes it way easier for everybody, the contractor, the wholesaler, to establish what is needed if something is needed. Here's a cutaway of the unit that shows where everything is. You can see the fresh air damper is up in the collar, the fresh air collar. If you have a unit with recirculation, the recirculation damper is just below that. You have your outdoor temperature thermistor just below that. The top fan is the exhaust blower assembly. The bottom one is the fresh air. You have the outside mounted control box with the LED screen. You have the exhaust damper down in the bottom left-hand corner. What we haven't really identified is, hey, the service door is just with latches, not with a device that needs a tool to open it up. And that's because as you look at this, you can see there is no wheel, fan wheel that you can see, no spinning devices, no moving devices. So you're allowed to have just a latch to open the service access doors. And as with all units, the homeowner's maintenance really is just change the filters. If you change the filters, my discussion with homeowners and with contractors is you won't have to clean the core. But if you let your filters get dirty and you don't clean them or replace them, if you have a MERV 13, that's a replaceable filter, not a washable filter, you could get your cores dirty. But just doing filter maintenance, the homeowner is not going to have to clean the core. Now, troubleshooting is made much easier because in the installation manual, you're going to have a table of error codes. You're going to see the error code on the LED screen. You're going to see the error code on the touchscreen control. So you have a full list of error codes. And in the solution section of the chart, you'll be taken step by step through what to do to confirm what the problem is. So that's a nice feature for troubleshooting your vanEE units, which really just makes the AI series a much more contractor-friendly product. I know that in some of the vanEE troubleshooting sections, they've had flow charts that were difficult to follow, instructions that were not really as clear. Now it's pretty clear and concise what you need to do if there are any problems. And that comes to an end of our presentation. And I want to thank you again for hanging in and listening. As I said before, this presentation will be available to all of you, but now we'll open it up for questions from any of you. Mike, you want to sort of handle if there are any questions?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a bunch of questions, which I will try to run through a bunch of them. The first one, Ryan, I'm going to throw this one at you. The question is, can the virtual feature be disabled?
No, so the virtual technology is an integral part of the unit. So as mentioned initially on the first run process, it is going to target a sort of perfect balance of the units. The advanced touchscreen can be used as an installer tool, and as we saw in those airflow menus, we can set the unit up to be imbalanced in those menus if we wish, but again, we must use an advanced touchscreen in that instance, but no, the virtual technology can't be disabled.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. And Grant, so here's a question for you. Got the question of why would anyone choose a 65% SRE instead of a 75%?
Hey, I thought I made that pretty clear at the beginning. vanEE may not like to hear this. There's no reason. There's no cost reason. There's no performance reason. I gotta say, I don't understand why they have it. There's no physical box reduction in size to choose a 110 CFM unit over a 150 CFM unit. The duct connections are 5-inch on both of them. I don't see any reason why you would choose. Let me take it back. There is one reason. So the V150 units are exhaust defrost. So if you want a recirculation defrost, then you'd have to choose one of the other units. But then again, I would choose the V160, not the V130 or the V110, provided you can live with 6-inch duct collars instead of 5-inch duct collars, because the box is the same size. You get more performance, you get higher efficiency, and you're not going to pay a price premium. So yeah, there's no reason that I can see other than if you have to have recirculation defrost.
Okay, another easy one, Grant, what is the ETA on the new ERV units?
Well, there are some ERVs, 65% ERVs available right now. The 75% ERVs, we were able to start ordering them, maybe 1 week ago, and they said it would be 3 weeks delivery. So yes, I'm going to say by the end of this month, we should now have 75% ERVs, hopefully.
Perfect, thanks, Grant. Ryan, a question for you. So we have the question of, could I use a smart thermostat, i.e. an Ecobee or a Nest as the main controller for these new units?
Yeah, certainly. So in that instance, what you're typically going to have, like I can speak to Ecobee, that's another line that we represent. On that platform, of course, you're going to have the ACC plus and the ACC minus connections. So we would connect both of those. Polarity doesn't matter in that instance, so just make sure your strands match up. ACC plus to say vent, ACC minus to common, and then when that contact closes, we can one, dictate on the vanEE unit, okay, when that contact closes, I want it to go into low, high, intermittent, or auto. And then on the Ecobee, we could dictate, okay, we want that contact to close so many minutes on every hour, or when the humidity reaches X%, for example. So there would be set up on both ends, but certainly they can be integrated quite easily.
Now, if I
Okay.
could add there, Mike, before we
Yep.
move on from the topic, I had been asked to get a wiring diagram for the Lennox iComfort S30 Smart Stat. So I actually have a wiring diagram dedicated to that. As Ryan said, there's one for Ecobee. I'm sort of waiting for some contracts to identify and give me information on the carrier smart stats, and then I'll produce a wiring diagram for that as well, just to make it a little bit easier for the contractors to make that connection.
Perfect. Yeah. So obviously, anybody's looking for wiring diagrams for new equipment, old equipment. We've got quite the archive, as Grant is alluding there. So Grant, I'm going to throw this one at you as well. We have the question of how exactly does the virtual calculate the CFM for the fan?
Well, that's a really good question. I'm going to have to guess, and Ryan, if you know, I'd appreciate that. I don't see that there's any actual measurement of airflow, so I'm going to assume it's a measurement of the performance parameters of the fan motors in particular, and that they have a chart that is in the programming that says, hey, if my motor is performing in this way, it's moving along this curve, this CFM curve, and they do the balancing that way. Is that your understanding, Ryan?
Yes, Grant, exactly. Yeah, very good guess. So in speaking with the engineering team, that's basically it, right? Like in the previous generation units, we used to see a chart on the door whereby it said, okay, if you're reading X amount of static pressure, we're delivering this much CFM. Same idea, not static pressure based in this instance. You hit the nail on the head, Grant. It is the operational parameters of the motor. And that is fed back through the algorithm to the unit to display the according CFM flows on the screen.
Perfect. So Grant, I'll throw this one at you as well. Have you heard anything from the factory about an AI series replacement for the 6LC or 12LC commercial units?
Commercial units has been a big thing with me and vanEE, because quite frankly, they've been left behind in their development of their commercial product offering. I would suggest that they're working on that now. They said they are, but I would put that over to Ryan, because he may have some information that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, so nothing definitive at this time. They certainly have identified a gap there, if you will. One that space should receive ECM-driven type technology. So that is something that they're working on. Also trying to close that gap, say, between where the Gold Series currently sits and the 600 CFM sort of minimum of the 6LC. There's a gap there as well. So all we know is, yes, there is product in development, but we don't have any sort of definitive details as to what's being developed and timelines at this time.
Okay, so further to that note, we'll move to residential. Grant, would any of these virtual units replace the 200H? Or between the two of you, are we aware, if that's not the case, of what unit would down the road?
Well, no, the existing AI line only goes up to, they call it 160 CFM, I call it 150 CFM. So that 200H is in the 190 CFM range. So the unit, if somebody said they needed ECM fan motor that would replace the 200H, is the G2400. So the Gold Series G2400, G3000 with the ECM fan motors, you have the same principle as I've just described with the AI series, where you can run the fan motors right down. You can replace much smaller units with these units. These units have a high efficiency, but they come at the premium cost of size. They're physically large. So yeah, there's nothing in the AI series that's going to replace the 200H at this point in time, other than the G2400.
Yeah, again, talk of a 200 CFM unit joining the AI series at some point, but their focus, of course, was rolling out the portfolio that's sort of shown in the literature and shown in this presentation first. Just from a volume of product sort of going out the door, the 200H really is no longer a big mover for them. So it is something they're planning on, but just something they didn't prioritize at this time. So we will see it at some point.
Okay, another good question has come in from the retrofit market. Obviously, we're all excited about the new units, but in the retrofit market where there's a lot of two wires running the bathrooms, are these new units capable of working with basic dehumidistat, crank timers, or is wireless going to be the option for them? Grant, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, and Ryan had sort of talked about it a little bit before, where even though it's said that you need 4 wires, you can make it work with 3 wires. You can make it work with the current style switches and not the new style AI switches, which are 3 wire. There are some shortcomings. Really, the shortcoming if you're running with 3 wire is when you engage a push button switch in one bathroom, it doesn't show that you've engaged that switch in the other bathrooms. I don't think that's a big deal because you're not going into your ensuite, having your shower, and then running into your powder room and looking, gee, is that switch telling me I've engaged high speed? But the same thing can be done for a 2-wire device. You can engage a 2-wire device, but you're not going to have any indication that it's on, so you won't have a light, and you won't have that indication in other rooms that it's even on. So you can make it work if you have to do it. But the better choice is to just go with the touchscreen and go with the wireless controls. Now you can have full-featured auxiliary switches, and you don't have to worry about wires at all.
Agreed. Yeah, well put, Grant.
So somewhat related, we have another question about whether these newer controls, specifically the touchscreen, is going to work on older equipment. Any thoughts on that one?
So the AI series must be used with the new series of controls, and those controls are not backward compatible with the previous generation units.
Perfect. And so Grant, you want to take a stab at this one? If you know, what is the plan for the Gold Series units moving forward?
No, I have my opinion on what should happen. The Gold Series haven't been around very long, so I don't envision them disappearing. I think, as Ryan said, they will be added to. You may get a Gold Series that moves down in CFM and box size to cover that 200H size. You may have a Gold Series that moves up to cover the gap that Ryan mentioned, where, hey, above 250 CFM to 600 CFM, we have nothing. And I'm seeing a lot of requests. I shouldn't say a lot, but I'm seeing requests for that 300 CFM model. And so I do think you'll see the Gold Series expand. It won't disappear and it won't contract. Ryan, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, no definitive information on where the portfolio is going. You know, they're keeping the cards pretty close to the chest. But as I say, you know, that they're aware of that gap and they want to fill that gap. And we have been told that a 200H replacement will be coming, whether that would be a scaled down Gold Series or whether that would be a scaled up AI. Remains to be seen, but you know, both of those gaps are something they're looking to fill.
Okay, another actually really good question is if you start up a unit and it's designed for a max CFM of 130, can you manually lower that CFM if it's a self-balancing unit? Grant, have you tried?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm not sure what the actual intent of the question with manual. So when you start up a unit, you can set what the maximum CFM and the minimum CFM actually is by using the up and down arrows and pressing set at the end of the process. So you can make a 130 CFM unit, a 110 CFM max unit, if that's what the question is. If the question is more, hey, you've set it all up as 130 and you want to one time make it 140, provided the unit has the capacity to there's no button that's going to say, let me make it 140. You're going to have to go back into the setup process and go, okay, I'm now going to reset the maximum speed from 140 instead of the existing 130. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think it did, Grant. Okay, well, I think at that point, I'm probably going to call it on the questions. There still are a few questions we haven't answered. So to those who asked questions that didn't get answered, I'll actually supply these to Grant, and we will certainly get back to you with those answers. Everybody who participates in this training will get a follow-up email tomorrow. You will get the slide handouts, and a video recording of this will also go up on our YouTube channel. Obviously, if you think of any questions or have any product questions after this training, just reply back to my email tomorrow and let us know how we can help you further. Obviously, Grant, thank you for sharing your time. Ryan, the same, thank you for sharing your time. It was a very good session.
Thanks for having me, guys, and thanks for everyone who attended.
Yep, thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Take care.